Michael Reed stepped out of his sleek black Tesla, but today he wasn't driving it to work. Instead, he left the luxury car keys in the glove compartment and climbed into an old, dusty Chevy pickup, borrowed for a mission no one else knew about. He pulled his frayed baseball cap low to hide the perfectly styled hair he usually combed every morning. Gone was the custom-tailored suit. In its place, a wrinkled flannel shirt and faded jeans. Just like any blue-collar worker, no one at Pinnacle Manufacturing would recognize the 32-year-old who had officially inherited the company just 3 months earlier. And that was exactly the point. He caught a glimpse of himself in the side mirror, his eyes pensive, as if questioning whether he truly had what it took for what lay ahead. "First time's always nerve-wracking," he murmured under his breath, trying to steady his nerves. The board thought he was out of his mind when he proposed going undercover as a worker to understand the company from the inside. Bate, a senior board member, snapped at him. "You should be in the executive suite, learning how to run a company, not playing dress-up." But Michael disagreed. His father, a man who had built this company from the ground up with nothing but grit and vision, believed a leader couldn't steer the ship from a distance. You had to know every cog in the machine. The massive factory came into view, a concrete and steel behemoth silhouetted against the early morning haze. More than 3,000 people worked here, producing everything from household appliances to heavy industrial equipment. On paper, it was a model company. Strong wages, solid benefits, and an impressive safety record. But Michael knew numbers didn't lie, if you knew how to read them. Recent quarterly reports hinted at deeper problems. Productivity was slipping, turnover was on the rise, and discrepancies in the financial records were brushed off as accounting glitches by the board. Michael didn't buy it. A well-oiled business like Pinnacle doesn't just start falling apart without a reason. He sensed something festering from within, something he could only uncover by seeing it with his own eyes. At the security gate, the guard barely glanced at his fake ID badge. Mike Rogers, newly hired for the night shift. No questions, no second looks. Just another nameless face in the crowd. Exactly what he needed. "New guy, huh?" A stocky man named Frank, clearly the shift supervisor, eyed him with skepticism. "You worked in a factory before?" Michael had anticipated this. "Some construction." "I'm good with my hands," he lied, trying to keep his tone steady. Frank snorted, half amused, half dismissive. "This ain't no birdhouse. Follow Rodriguez. Maybe you'll last the week." Rodriguez was a middle-aged man with sun-darkened skin, calloused hands, and eyes that looked like they'd seen it all. "Keep up, I don't repeat myself," he muttered, turning sharply. Michael nodded, his pulse quickening. He was stepping into an entirely different world, a world of sweat, grease, and anonymity. The next 12 hours were brutal. The roar of machinery, the constant clanging of metal, and the non-stop pace of the line left Michael dizzy. His back screamed in pain, his fingers blistered and raw. He pushed himself to keep up, but every cycle seemed to wear down another layer of his confidence. By the time the lunch bell rang, he nearly collapsed onto a cold metal chair in the cramped cafeteria. His homemade sandwich sat on the table, looking as dry and unappetizing as the empty soda can beside it. He didn't have the energy to eat. "First day's always the worst," a soft voice said beside him. A woman around his age, her hair pulled into a practical ponytail, wore a Pinnacle uniform faded with time. "I'm Anita. Quality control," she said with a half smile. "Mike," he replied, grateful for the rare kindness. "Is it always this intense?" Anita's smile faded slightly. "It didn't used to be. They've been cutting staff left and right, but the workload stays the same. Everyone's doing double shifts." She looked around, then leaned in. "It wasn't like this before. Mr. Reed, the old man, used to walk the floor every week, knew people by name. But ever since he passed..." She shrugged. "Corporate doesn't care about us. All they see are numbers. Her words hit Michael like a punch to the gut. His father, the man so many had respected, had died suddenly just 6 months ago. Michael had been overseas managing their European operations. He only returned when the board insisted the company needed someone at the helm. Had things really fallen apart so quickly? New management's no different, another worker muttered from a few seats away. Bet he's on a yacht somewhere while we're breaking our backs making him richer. Michael bit into his sandwich, pretending to chew, trying to hide the sting of those words. So that's what they thought of him, a spoiled, out-of-touch heir living in luxury while they suffered. Guilt knotted in his chest. But in that moment, clarity came. If he was going to change this company, if he truly wanted to honor his father's legacy, it had to start right here, with these people, with the uncomfortable truths no one wanted to confront. The days blurred together like a heavy fog. Michael stuck to his cover, immersing himself in the rhythms of the factory floor. He learned the unspoken rules, the silent systems that kept things barely functioning, how workers dodged broken machinery, how they stole moments of rest, how the place ran not on policy but on survival. Behind the steel and machinery, a darker picture emerged. He documented it all. Dangerous work zones, unrealistic quotas, neglected equipment. The glossy corporate reports didn't come close to capturing the rot he was seeing firsthand. By the end of his first week, his body had started to adapt. But his mind couldn't shake the sense of decay eating away at the company from within. It was on his 9th night that Michael first noticed him. The elderly janitor moving slowly between machines long after most workers had gone home. Under the dim factory lights, he didn't move like a man doing a menial job. There was grace in his routine, purpose. "Who's that?" Michael asked Carlos, one of the few co-workers he trusted. Carlos glanced over. "That's Sam. Been here the longest. Used to be on the line, now he just keeps the place clean." Michael watched closely as Sam meticulously swept around workstations, emptying trash bins with almost reverent care. Something about the way he moved reminded Michael of his father, the same insistence on doing things right, even when no one was looking. After his shift ended near midnight, Michael trudged toward his borrowed pickup, the lot nearly deserted. Leaves rustled in the distance. Then a flicker of motion near the loading dock caught his eye. Curious, he veered off course, slipping into the shadows. What he saw stopped him cold. Crouched between two dumpsters, illuminated by harsh security lights, was Sam. The old man's hands trembled as he sifted through a black trash bag, carefully pulling out a half-eaten sandwich, a bruised apple, and a dried-out piece of cheese. He arranged them gently on a clean piece of cardboard, eyes darting around nervously. Michael froze. The man who, just hours ago, had moved with quiet pride and dignity, was now cobbling together a meal from garbage. His humility shattered under the cold reality of hunger. Michael's heart sank. How had it come to this? In a company his father built, with fair wages, strong values, and human dignity. How was a loyal worker forced to scavenge for food? Without thinking, Michael stepped forward. The sound of gravel underfoot made Sam jump. He turned sharply, eyes wide with fear and shame. "I was just cleaning up," he stammered. "I'll be out of your way. Please don't report this." His voice trembled. Not with guilt, but with desperation. Michael raised his hand gently, his voice soft, as if calming a frightened bird. "No, I'm not a supervisor," he said. "I'm Mike, just a line worker. Are you okay?" Sam's face trembled, the deep wrinkles across it etched by a lifetime of hardship. But then he straightened up slightly, trying to reclaim a shred of dignity. "I'm fine. Just going through a rough patch. I don't want to cause trouble for anyone. No one digs through trash when they're fine. Michael said quietly but with conviction. He crouched down to Sam's level, erasing the invisible barrier between them. "What's going on? Are they not paying you enough, or is it something else?" Sam avoided his gaze. His eyes darted nervously toward the floodlights, like he was terrified someone might see him. "I'm not looking for pity, just trying to save a few bucks. Some days I need to use that money for my wife's meds. She has a hard condition. If I can just scrape enough together for her prescription, we'll be okay." Michael felt like a knife had slashed across his chest. He had never imagined a situation like this, that within the shadows of this factory existed silent stories that were deeply haunting. Mike. Name's Sam Johnson, 43 years at Pinnacle. Let's just pretend you didn't see anything tonight. He stood up, adjusted his shirt, and regained a posture of quiet pride, like a soldier preparing for battle. 43 years. Michael whispered, stunned. The company was only 45 years old. That meant Sam had been there almost since day one. Michael pulled out his wallet and offered Sam some bills. "Let me buy you a proper dinner. There's a diner open all night just a few blocks from here." Sam shook his head firmly, his eyes still holding that steely pride. "I don't take money I didn't earn. I don't beg. Now if you'll excuse me, I have to get back to work. These hallways won't clean themselves." Then he turned and walked away. The small figure hunched over again, returning to his tools and mop like an invisible man. But to Michael, in that moment, Sam had become the soul of the entire factory. Michael stood still in the cold night air, watching Sam's silhouette disappear into the building. Even as the janitor dragged along his battered cart and worn-out supplies, his back remained straight, as if dignity was the only thing he still had to hold on to. But the half-eaten food scraps laid out behind him, like a pitiful, humiliating banquet, remained burned in Michael's mind, a silent accusation. His chest tightened as he thought about all the other people like Sam, those who didn't just work for a paycheck, but for pride, for meaning, for love of the work that had defined their lives. And yet, now, they were reduced to picking through trash to survive. Something inside Pinnacle was truly broken. Something his father had spent a lifetime building, now slowly being eaten away from within. And in that cold fog of bitter reality, Michael made a vow. He wouldn't stop. Not just for Sam, but for every worker who thought he was just another rich kid sailing around on a yacht. He would do what was right for his father's legacy. Over the next 3 days, Michael intentionally sought Sam out. Casual greetings in the hallway, light conversation during break times. But the old man kept his distance. His stiff posture would tighten any time Michael came near, like a man used to hardship and always bracing for the next blow. One night, around 2 a.m., the unofficial lunch hour of the graveyard shift, Michael brought 2 sandwiches into a near-empty break room. He sat beside Sam and gently slid one of them over. "My wife always packs too much. Take one, will you?" It was a lie. Michael wasn't married. But he knew Sam's pride wouldn't allow him to accept charity. He just wanted the man to have a decent meal, at least once. Sam stared at the sandwich for a long moment, then finally gave a small nod. "She sounds like a thoughtful woman," he said in a raspy voice, tinged with rare warmth. Michael watched as Sam took small, careful bites, savoring every chew like it was fine dining. "How long you been at Pinnacle?" "Almost since the beginning," Sam replied, his eyes drifting far away. "Back when Mr. Reed was still working out of his garage. I helped him install the very first assembly line." His voice was quiet, but filled with pride. Michael's heart skipped a beat. Sam was talking about his father. You knew Mr. Reed?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Knew him. I worked side by side with him. We hauled steel beams, tightened bolts. He never put himself above anyone else. Even as the boss, he'd roll up his sleeves and get dirty. Nobody who worked with him ever forgot that." Sam chuckled softly, letting his guard down for just a moment. Michael wanted to ask more, to hear stories he never got to witness, memories of a man he had admired but never truly known. But reality tugged him back. "You work hard, Sam, but is it enough? Are you getting by?" Sam's face turned stone-like. A long silence hung between them like a wall. Michael almost brought up the night by the dumpsters, but stopped when he saw the flicker of shame cross Sam's face. Eventually, Sam sighed. "It's not that the pay's low, it's that I haven't gotten paid." His voice cracked. 3 months. Not a cent. They keep saying it's a system issue, but I still have rent, utilities, and my wife's medication. Michael's brows furrowed. "Did you talk to HR?" "Right away." "First month. Carson. My supervisor said payroll was having issues. Second month, he told me my complaint got lost. Third month, he said maybe it was time I retired if I couldn't handle the stress." Sam's voice dropped, bitter and tired. "I could retire. But who's going to hire a 70-year-old man? This job is all I've got left." A cold fury surged through Michael. He couldn't believe a company like Pinnacle could let a loyal worker be treated this way. He clenched his fists, keeping his tone even. "That's illegal, Sam. Straight up fraud." Sam just shrugged. His eyes were heavy. "I know. But what can I do? I've got no one left to fight for me." Later that night, while Sam returned to his familiar mop and bucket, Michael slipped into an empty office and logged into a computer under his fake employee credentials. His access was limited, but just enough to get into payroll records. What he saw made his stomach churn. According to the digital records, Sam Johnson had been paid on time every 2 weeks, with direct deposits going into a specific bank account. Every detail was perfect. Sam had likely never even seen a cent of it. Someone had stolen his paycheck, every single one of them, and rerouted them into an account he didn't even know existed. The next morning, Michael called the HR department from a payphone outside the plant, using his undercover name. "I'm calling on behalf of a coworker," he said calmly. "Sam Johnson, maintenance. He says he hasn't received any pay for 3 months. He heard the sound of keys clacking on the other end. "Our records show that Mr. Johnson's pay has been processed regularly and on schedule," the HR rep replied. "If there's an issue, he should speak with his supervisor." Michael pushed harder, trying to get more, but every question was met with the same cold response. "There's no record of any missed payments or complaints from Mr. Johnson." That final line echoed in Michael's mind long after he hung up. It wasn't just theft, it was cover-up, and now he knew it ran deeper than just one man. There was a rot within Pinnacle, and he was going to expose it. Michael clenched the phone tightly in his hand. He didn't respond. Silently, he hung up. Over the next 3 days, Michael continued his investigation without rest. He quietly approached every janitorial worker one by one during brief moments when no one was around. 3 of them, weathered faces, quiet voices, none of whom had ever spoken up, eventually admitted they were experiencing the same problems: missing wages, bounced checks, strange deductions no one could explain. The common denominator? They all reported to the same person, Carson. Later, during a shift change, Michael mentioned it to Anita. She glanced around warily, then whispered with a tone of warning, "Your new friend is asking too many questions." Michael frowned. "What do you mean? I saw you talking to old Sam. Look, anyone who starts poking around payroll around here, it never ends well, especially not right now." But Michael didn't back down. He kept digging. Anita sighed, her eyes heavy with the weariness of months spent staying quiet. She told him that after Mr. Reed passed away, 2 new managers had been brought in from regional offices, Carson and a woman named Vega, cold as ice. They quickly consolidated power, especially over outsourced labor contracts like janitorial and maintenance. "No one dares to ask questions," Anita said bitterly, "because everyone's got bills to pay." That night, as Michael walked out of the factory, an older man pulled him aside. It was Hector, a veteran employee. He looked around cautiously before speaking. Heard you've been asking about janitorial payroll? Michael nodded, guarded, just concerned about a friend. Hector stepped closer, his voice dropping. Listen to me. Carson and Vega control all the outsourced maintenance contracts and the accounting department. They've been running this scam for months, creating fake employee records, skimming money from the people with the least power. Guys like Sam. Michael leaned in. How do you know? Hector glanced nervously over Michael's shoulder. I overheard them arguing in Carson's office. There are fake files, shell companies. But you didn't hear that from me. I've got 5 years left before I retire. As he turned to walk away, Hector added one last thing. If you really want to blow this thing open, check the subcontractor payments. That's where they're hiding the money. That became the turning point. The next day, during his lunch break, Michael quietly slipped into the accounting office using an internal login. This time he found it. A pattern of suspicious payments, maintenance services being billed at nearly twice the rate of the previous year's contract. Vague administrative fees, unexplained surcharges, no corresponding paperwork to justify them. The numbers lit up the screen like blood stains. Undeniable evidence of embezzlement happening in broad daylight, taken directly from those with no voice to fight back. Then, a shadow fell across the keyboard. Michael looked up. Carson stood in the doorway, his eyes as cold as steel, his lips pressed into a hard line. What are you doing here, Mike? He asked sharply. This isn't a break room for line workers. Michael forced a calm tone. Just checking my pay stub, got lost in the system. Carson didn't smile. Didn't blink. His stare only grew harder. Payroll files are restricted access. Get back to your station before I put your name on the violation report. Michael turned and walked away, every step feeling heavier. He could feel Carson's glare stabbing into his back like a knife. He had been careless. His anger had pushed him too far. And now, Carson knew. That night, from a gas station payphone, Michael made a call to the only person he trusted outside the factory. Eleanor Simmons, his father's longtime attorney, the woman who'd handled every legal document when the company was founded. I need to meet, urgently, he said. Bring every maintenance payment file from the past 12 months. They met at a 24-hour diner just 2 blocks from the plant. Eleanor, silver-haired, sharp-aimed, and composed as ever, listened in silence as Michael laid out everything. When he finished, she wasn't surprised. I've suspected as much, she said, flipping open her leather briefcase. But the board hasn't wanted to hear it. They just wanted a smooth transition. She laid 2 contracts side by side. Compare them, last year's maintenance agreement and the current one. Michael scanned the pages, his eyes widening. The current contract's cost had nearly doubled, padded with vague line items like special coordination fees and peripheral supervision services. They rubber-stamped all of it. Eleanor continued. After your father passed, the board didn't want to stir the waters. They gave Carson and Vega full autonomy. Michael rubbed his temples. I need more proof, bank accounts, transaction trails. Be careful, Eleanor warned. If they've been running this long, they'll have defenses in place. The next day, Michael changed tactics. Rather than risking another break-in, he began quietly interviewing workers from every department. And soon, a pattern emerged. Undeniable and damning. It wasn't just janitors. Low-level employees across the factory were reporting similar issues. Missing overtime pay, strange deductions, delayed reimbursements. Every time I ask, they say they'll fix it next pay cycle. But they never do, said a forklift driver. My health insurance premium doubled out of nowhere, another worker added. But my cousin works at the insurance company. They said nothing changed on their end. Each story on its own might have seemed small, easy to ignore, but together, they painted a picture of systematic theft. The total losses could easily reach hundreds of thousands of dollars. Amid all the chaos, Michael found an invaluable ally, a young programmer in the IT department, willing to help him track the digital trail. Zoe, a quiet but sharp systems tech, arranged to meet Michael in the employee smoking area, even though he didn't smoke. "There's something wrong with the security logs," she whispered, eyes scanning the empty lot. "Someone's been creating temporary user accounts, then deleting them after hours, like they're trying not to leave any trace. Can you see what they're accessing?" Michael asked, tension rising in his voice. "Not directly. If I dig too far, they'll know. But I know they're getting into the banking and vendor payment modules." She handed him a small USB drive. "This is a backup of last quarter's payment data. I grabbed it before the weekly purge. After that, only the cleaned versions remain." That night, in his modest motel room, Michael pored over hundreds of lines of data. To anyone else, the numbers might seem unremarkable, but now they told a clear story. Fake vendors, inflated invoices, circular money transfers through shell companies, all leading to one destination: offshore accounts. The next morning, Michael opened his locker and found a small note slipped through the vent. "Back off. Final warning." Michael didn't flinch. He was too close to the truth to back down now. During his lunch break, he quietly made his way to a different part of the factory, the administrative records area. There he discovered another disturbing pattern. All payroll complaint forms had mysteriously vanished from the files. Then, in a moment of careless inattention, he spotted Vega's assistant secretly feeding documents into a shredder. Meanwhile, Sam's situation had grown increasingly dire. "They're threatening to cut my hours," Sam whispered to Michael during a break. "Said they're restructuring the maintenance schedule. But I can't survive if they cut even one more hour." Time was running out. Carson had started tailing Michael, making excuses to check his work, even rifling through his locker on 2 separate occasions. Michael knew he needed one final piece of evidence: the exact location where the stolen money was being funneled. He decided to take a risk. That night he called Sam under the pretense of a family emergency. "I need to take tomorrow off, but I can't afford another absence on my record. Could you clock me in?" A risky, ethically murky move, but his only shot. The next day, while he was officially on the night shift, Michael drove to meet the one person he could trust: Walter Chin, the only board member who had been a close friend of his father. "I know what's going on at Pinnacle," Michael said, dropping a thick folder onto Walter's desk, "and I need your help to set a trap." Walter read through every page, his face darkening with each one. "This is bigger than I thought." "How long have you known?" "Not long enough," Michael replied, "but long enough to know Carson and Vega have been stealing for months, and I believe they're preparing to disappear." "What do you need from me?" "Full access to the company's financial systems, and your digital signatures so I can monitor transactions." "They're getting suspicious. They'll make a mistake soon." Just as Michael stepped out of Walter's office, his phone buzzed. A message from Zoe. "They're in the system. Large transfers underway." He raced back to the factory, adrenaline surging. 2 weeks of quiet investigation had come down to the next few hours. According to Zoe's data, Carson and Vega had begun siphoning off millions. If they escaped today, everything would be lost. In the parking lot, Michael nearly ran into Sam, who was hurrying toward the building, his face pale. "What's going on?" Michael asked, grabbing the older man's arm. "Carson called an emergency meeting for all maintenance staff," Sam replied, breathless. "Said there's going to be a restructuring. Everyone's nervous. We all know what that really means." "When's the meeting?" 20 minutes. Conference room B. Michael squeezed his shoulder. "Don't worry. Just go like normal. But remember, everything's about to change." Using the anonymous access Walter had granted him, Michael slipped into an empty office and logged into the financial system. His eyes widened at the numbers on the screen. Nearly $1,200,000. 0 cents had been funneled into offshore accounts within the past hour. Without hesitation, he called Eleanor. "They're moving the money now, and they've gathered the workers. The police are standing by," Eleanor responded, "but we need to catch them in the act to press charges. Do you have a plan?" Michael stared at the screen, his pulse pounding. "Yes." Have Walter leak that internal audit report we forged. The one about payroll overages. Let's see how they react. Remember the fake audit memo we drafted? He added, turning to Walter. The one about investigating payroll discrepancies? It's time to use it. Within 15 minutes, Walter had sent a confidential email to the entire executive team, including Carson and Vega. The message announced an emergency audit beginning the next day due to serious irregularities found in the maintenance payroll. Michael positioned himself just outside Conference Room B, where Carson was addressing around 20 nervous maintenance workers, including Sam. Carson's phone buzzed. Michael saw the color drain from his face. Carson quickly excused himself and practically ran down the hall to Vega's office. Michael quietly followed and stopped just outside the glass-paneled wall. Inside, he could see the two managers arguing in hushed, frantic tones. "Transfer the rest now," Carson hissed. "Use the new account in the Caymans." "What about the old accounts?" "They're tracing them already," Vega whispered. "Tell the maintenance crew we're updating their contracts. Get them to sign waivers. We need to cover our tracks." Michael immediately texted Eleanor. They took the bait. Moving to final phase, then to Zoe. Monitor all transactions from their terminals. Record everything. Next, he called the security office. For the first time in weeks, he used his real name. "This is Michael Reed, owner of Pinnacle Manufacturing," he said firmly. "Lock down all exits immediately. Send 2 guards to the main conference room." Now, the head of security, already briefed by Walter, responded with only a crisp, "Yes, sir. Police are on standby." Michael returned to the conference room just as Carson and Vega walked back in. They were composed, smiling even, as they began handing out documents to the workers. "Just a simple contract update," Vega said smoothly. "Sign at the bottom, and we can all get back to work." Sam, still clearly confused, had just picked up a pen when Michael stepped through the doorway. "I wouldn't sign that if I were you, Sam," he said loudly. Every head turned toward him. "This is a private meeting," Carson snapped. "Back to your station, Rogers, or you're fired." Michael simply smiled, slowly removing his baseball cap and brushing his hair back. "I don't think you have the authority to fire me, Carson." He turned to address the workers. "For those of you who don't know me, I'm Michael Reed. I own this company." Gasps rippled through the room. Sam's mouth fell open, his hand dropping the pen like it had suddenly burned him. Carson lunged for the exit, but 2 guards blocked his path. Vega, more composed, quietly tried deleting files from her tablet until Michael stepped forward and took it from her hands. "Too late," he said, locking eyes with her. "Every transaction has been recorded. The money's been frozen." "You can't prove anything," Carson spat. "Actually, I can," Michael said evenly. "While you were busy bleeding these workers dry, I was documenting everything. Offshore accounts, fake invoices, manipulated paychecks." He turned to Sam. "Even the 3 months of wages stolen from a man who gave 43 years of his life to this company." The door opened. 2 police officers entered, flanked by Eleanor and Walter. Carson and Vega's faces turned ashen. Michael stepped forward once more. "This is Miss Simmons, our legal counsel. She's prepared full documentation for prosecution. And Mr. Chun from our board has authorized me to implement immediate changes." He turned back to the employees, some skeptical, others beginning to hope. "First, every employee who's had wages stolen will receive full back pay, plus 10% interest, by the end of this week. Second, the outsourced maintenance contract is terminated. Effective today, all of you are now direct employees with full benefits." The room erupted. Applause. Cheers. Some wept openly. Sam stood motionless, his eyes locked on Michael, emotion flickering across his face. In that moment, Michael saw a look that reminded him of his father. Quiet pride in a moment of justice. As Carson and Vega were handcuffed and led away, every worker watched, Michael felt the weight he'd carried for weeks begin to lift. But when he met Sam's gaze, he knew. This story wasn't over yet. There was still something in the old man's eyes. A memory, a truth, or perhaps a secret that Michael had yet to uncover. And so the factory continued humming, but for the next 48 hours, people weren't just talking about the arrests. They were talking about the young heir who didn't hide behind a boardroom door, who walked the floor, listened, and fought back. Though Michael had tried to keep his identity a secret, word spread like wildfire through the production lines. Whispers, glances, conversations all circled around one shocking truth. The owner had gone undercover. The corrupt managers had been arrested. And now, a new era was dawning. As rumors swirled through the factory, Michael quietly worked with Eleanor and Walter to finish compiling the evidence. What they discovered next went even deeper than anyone imagined. The corruption extended far beyond maintenance payroll. Carson and Vega had infiltrated departments throughout the company, aided by several mid-level managers, people who were willing to look the other way in exchange for hefty kickbacks. "We have to tell everyone," Michael told Walter on the morning of the third day. "The rumors are getting out of control, and they deserve the truth." Walter nodded, a quiet reverence in his eyes. "Your father. He'd be proud of how you've handled this." A company-wide meeting was called for noon that day. Production across the entire plant came to a halt. Something that had never happened in Pinnacle's 45-year history. Tension filled the air as nearly 2,000 employees gathered on the main production floor, which had been hastily converted into an impromptu meeting space. At exactly noon, Michael stepped onto the elevated platform, looking out over the sea of workers. He was no longer Mike Rogers, in worn jeans and a ball cap. Today, he wore a clean, well-fitted suit. Professional, but not flashy. The crowd fell silent as people began to recognize him, their former co-worker now revealed to be the company's owner. "For those who don't know me," Michael began, his voice ringing clearly through the microphone, "I'm Michael Reed. My father, Henry Reed, founded this company 45 years ago." He paused and took a deep breath. "3 weeks ago, I worked alongside you, not as a CEO or executive, but as a worker on the production line." A murmur rippled through the crowd, and what I found shocked me. A group of managers, led by Carson Davis and Regina Vega, orchestrated a complex scheme to steal from the hardest-working and lowest-paid employees in this company. He motioned to the screen behind him. It lit up with detailed graphs and clear evidence of fraud, followed by a list of affected employees and the amounts stolen from each of them. Gasps spread throughout the room. Angry whispers. Some people froze when they saw their names. Others pointed at the figures in disbelief. "Every person on this list," Michael said firmly, "will be fully reimbursed, with interest, by the end of this week." He paused for emphasis, and that's just the beginning. The screen changed to show booking photos of Carson and Vega in police custody. The once powerful faces were now tarnished by disgrace, are being criminally charged with fraud, embezzlement, and fostering a toxic work environment. They will never again hold the power to harm good, honest people. A wave of applause broke out, growing louder as it spread. Michael raised his hand for silence, but "There's something else I need to say." An apology. The room fell quiet again. "My father built Pinnacle on the values of respect and integrity. After his death, I focused too much on our European division, trusting others to carry on his legacy here. That was my mistake, and many of you paid the price for it." Michael scanned the crowd, searching for a familiar face. And there he was, Sam, standing quietly near the back, unreadable as ever. But starting today, everything changes. Michael turned back to the microphone. "First, we're launching a profit-sharing program for all employees with over 1 year of service. You won't just work for a paycheck. You'll share in the success. Second, our maintenance department is no longer outsourced. Every one of you will be hired directly with full benefits and protections. Third, we're forming an employee oversight committee with representatives from every department, every concern, from payroll discrepancies to workplace conditions, will have a voice, and that voice will be heard. The factory erupted with cheers. Some workers hugged each other, many wiped away tears. When the noise finally died down, Michael spoke again, his voice softer. Thanks. There's one person who helped me see what I was blind to, though he didn't even know it. A man whose pride wasn't eroded by time, even when life pushed him to the edge. Michael's eyes landed on Sam once more. He didn't just help me see the truth. He reminded me of what my father stood for: kindness, integrity, and unwavering loyalty. Sam stood still, his eyes glassy, yet his posture proud as ever. Workers around him patted his shoulder, nodding in admiration. Michael stepped down from the platform, not as an owner towering above, but as one of them, walking among the people. And in that moment, he understood. He hadn't just saved his father's company. He had rekindled its legacy. Sam Johnson has been with Pinnacle since the day my father laid its first foundation stone, Michael said, his voice echoing across the silent factory floor. The day I saw him scavenging food from a trash bin because his wages had been stolen, I realized just how far we drifted from my father's vision, his values. The hall was silent. Every eye turned towards Sam, standing quietly among the crowd. His back was straight, his eyes steady, but raw emotion shimmered at the corners, a mix of sorrow, anger, and something deeper, perhaps hope, finally being restored. "Sam?" Michael called out, his voice warm and full of respect. "Would you please join me up here?" For a few heartbeats, Sam didn't move. The room held its breath. Then, slowly and purposefully, he began to walk forward. The crowd parted. Hands reached out to touch his shoulder. Eyes followed him, not with pity, but with reverence. No longer just a janitor, a symbol, a soul of Pinnacle. When he reached the stage, Michael extended his hand, but instead of a formal handshake, he pulled Sam into a heartfelt embrace. It wasn't just a gesture. It was an apology, a thank you, and a long overdue recognition. "Thank you," Michael whispered. Then he turned back to the microphone. Sam Johnson helped build Pinnacle, not as an engineer or an executive, but as a hard-working man who never stopped believing in doing the right thing. And today, I'm proud to announce, from this moment forward, Sam will serve as our employee welfare advisor. He will report directly to me and will have full authority to investigate any complaints without interference. The room exploded again. This time, it wasn't just applause. It was cheering, laughter, coworkers embracing, slapping backs, celebrating. Sam's normally stoic expression was overtaken by stunned disbelief, as if he couldn't quite believe what was happening. But in his eyes, there was a light Michael had never seen before. A spark of validation, of respect, and finally, of justice. Michael stepped back, letting Sam stand alone at center stage, a tribute in itself. From the far side of the room, Michael spotted 3 mid-level managers being quietly escorted out through a side door. They were the ones who had known and said nothing. Their faces were pale, hollow. They had watched their peers celebrate the fall of silence and the rise of truth. This was the message Michael intended to send. Pinnacle would no longer be a place where silence earned promotions and courage went ignored. And now, beneath a roof once darkened by greed and deceit, light was finally returning. Michael looked around, his heart full with an emotion he couldn't quite name. Among the laughter and cheers, in the grateful eyes that turned toward him, he rediscovered something he hadn't been sure he still deserved: trust no one, whether sweeping the floors or leading the board, would ever go hungry, stay silent, or be buried under injustice. Not as long as the name Reed stood behind them. And in Sam's eyes now, no longer quiet, no longer doubtful, Michael saw what his father once tried to teach him. Not through words, but through action. Leadership is not about being served, it's about serving others.